Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a valley wrapped in the haze of summer heat, where cicadas hum and the air smells faintly of olive groves. You are here at Olympia, a sacred ground carved out for the gods, and something extraordinary is about to happen. The first Olympic Games are waking, and you're about to wander through the dust and incense, shoulder to shoulder with Greeks who have traveled days, even weeks, just to be part of this festival. You probably won't survive the sprint, but don't worry, you're only here as a sleepy spectator tonight. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing this community stretch across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. And if you are new here, welcome to Sleepless Historian, your bedtime history channel. Tonight's episode is how the ancient Greeks held the first Olympic Games. The Valley of Olympia glows as the sun dips low. You trudge along the dirt path, your sandals puffing up small clouds of dust. All around you, pilgrims and athletes spill into the sanctuary. Warriors from Sparta, merchants from Corinth, and curious travelers from the islands. The crowd has that nervous excitement you feel just before a concert begins. Everyone knows this is new, untested, but already legendary. Stone altars rise ahead, their surfaces blackened from years of offerings. Though the games are only just beginning, Olympia has long been a holy place, home to myths older than anyone can remember. The whispers in the crowd speak of Zeus, of Hera, of divine presence so heavy you almost feel your shoulders sag under it. The sanctuary is sacred, and stepping inside feels like leaving behind the squabbles of the outside world. Even the roughest Spartan lowers his voice here. You notice the stadium isn't some grand marble amphitheater. Not yet. It's a stretch of leveled earth, simple and raw, framed by grassy banks where thousands will sit shoulder to shoulder. And that's the beauty. You realize you're standing at the beginning, before things got polished and extravagant. The dust, the rough wood, the smoke from campfires curling into the evening sky. It feels real, primal. As you settle on a patch of grass, the sounds rise around you. A flute carrying across the sanctuary, merchants haggling over honey cakes, children darting between grown-ups, their laughter carrying like bright sparks. There's a carnival atmosphere, but beneath it hums something deeper, something sacred. This isn't just entertainment, it's a bond between mortals and gods. One fact historians agree on: Olympia was chosen because it was already a religious hub, a place where Zeus's presence was carved into every rock and echo. But here's the quirky bit. Some say the very first contests weren't even foot races at all, but wrestling matches or even funeral games honoring fallen heroes. Historians still argue whether the earliest Olympics were more like memorial feasts than athletic festivals. That debate swirls as lively as the dust around your sandals. You glance toward the temple. Priests in white robes shuffle past, their arms loaded with laurel branches. They're preparing for the sacrifices that will open the games tomorrow. Even in the dimming light, The ivory and gold statue of Zeus looms inside, catching flickers of torchlight. It's not just a statue. It's a reminder that everyone here, from champion to beggar, owes their strength to him. Night gathers slow, and fires begin to speckle the encampment. The air smells of roasting lamb and figs, smoke mingling with the resin of burning pine. You wander past groups of men oiling their bodies, their muscles slick and gleaming in the firelight as they limber up for the coming contests. Laughter breaks out. Someone jokes about tripping before the finish line, and even the stern athletes crack a grin. Yes, this is sacred, but it's also human. And you, drifting in this space between dream and history, can almost feel time bending. You're one among thousands, listening to the murmur of the crowd, the crackle of fires, the distant thrum of a drum. Tomorrow, the world's first Olympic Games will truly begin, and you'll witness history not in textbooks, but in sweat, dust, and prayer. For now, though, you lie back on the grass, gazing at the stars above Olympia. They shimmer sharp against the black sky, the same stars that guided sailors and storytellers for centuries. The sanctuary quiets as though even the gods are waiting. And in that hush, you drift toward sleep, ready for the festival to unfold. The dawn creeps in soft and golden, sliding across the hills of Olympia and washing the sanctuary in a glow that feels almost staged for a god. You stir from the grass, the hum of voices already stirring like bees in a hive. Today is for Zeus, and no one forgets it. Every step you take crunches over dry earth. Every breath carries incense and ash. You can almost taste the devotion in the air. At the heart of Olympia, priests bustle around the great altar, their robes brushing the stone as they move with practiced rhythm. Some carry jugs of wine. Others lead nervous bulls whose hooves clatter against the stone paving. The animals snort and roll their eyes as if they know their fate is sealed. It's not cruelty, it's reverence. The Greeks believe Zeus must be honored with life itself, and in return, he'll bless the festival with fair skies and honest competition. You feel the crowd tightening, leaning forward, as if no one wants to miss the moment the smoke rises. The statue of Zeus towers nearby, glimmering in gold and ivory. Its gaze is fixed, cold and majestic, a reminder that these games aren't just for bragging rights. They are promises to the God who watches from above. One mainstream fact you probably didn't expect: that colossal statue would one day become one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Though here and now, it's brand new, dazzling like sunlight carved into human form. You watch the priests sprinkle barley and pour wine over the altar. Then comes the silence. So heavy you can hear the bull's hooves shifting nervously. The first cut is swift, and the crowd exhales as fire is kindled. Smoke curls upward in lazy ribbons, carrying the scent of roasted meat and resin to the heavens. The priests chant, their voices deep and steady, echoing across the valley like rolling thunder. This is the heartbeat of the games, the offering that makes everything possible. And you, standing among thousands, feel the oddest sensation. You're not just watching, you're part of it. Every shout, every whispered prayer adds to the invisible current rising into the sky. The quirky tidbit here: Alongside bowls, the Greeks sometimes offered tiny cakes shaped like animals. Imagine crafting a cookie in the form of a ram, tossing it into the fire and saying, "Close enough." It's a small, almost humorous gesture tucked inside all this grandeur. But it reminds you, rituals aren't always about perfection. They're about sincerity. The drums pick up as the sacrifice burns, and the first cheer ripples through the crowd. It's not wild, not raucous, more like a deep, communal sigh of relief. The gods are satisfied. The games can begin. Historians still argue whether these sacrifices were mainly about feeding the gods or feeding the people. After all, once the ritual portion was offered, the rest of the meat often went to communal feasts. Was Zeus really the one eating, or was it just a sacred excuse for the best barbecue in Greece? You smirk at the thought as smoke stings your nose and your stomach growls. All around, you notice how reverence and festivity blend seamlessly. A Spartan warrior kneels, head bowed in prayer, while a group of Athenian merchants nearby argue about which athlete will win the stadion sprint. Children climb onto their father's shoulders for a better view of the altar, giggling as the smoke swirls toward them. Devotion doesn't cancel out joy, it intertwines with it. The priests complete their chants, raising laurel branches to signal the ritual's end. A collective murmur rolls across the sanctuary, like the audience settling back into their seats after an overture. The games have officially been handed to Zeus, stamped with divine approval. As you drift back through the crowd, the sun now high and warm on your skin, you realize the spectacle wasn't about the spectacle at all. It was about anchoring everything. The sprint, the wrestling, the revelry, in something bigger than human rivalry. The games are theater, yes, but their stage rests on faith. And as the morning deepens, you feel the weight of that faith settle on your shoulders too, heavy but strangely comforting, like being wrapped in a blanket you didn't know you needed. Tomorrow, athletes will race for glory, but today, every heartbeat belongs to Zeus. The smoke of sacrifice still lingers in the air as you wander out toward the roads leading into Olympia. It feels like the whole Greek world is pouring into this valley, dusty trails alive with chatter, sandals slapping against stone, and wagons creaking under the weight of jars, blankets, and bronze trinkets. You join the throng, moving shoulder to shoulder with strangers who don't feel so strange once you realize everyone is here for the same reason. Travelers come from every direction, from Athens, with their polished accents and love of debate, from Sparta, marching in that tight-lipped, disciplined way, looking like they might wrestle a bull just for practice. From tiny villages most people couldn't point to on a map, carrying jars of wine, figs, olives, and gossip. The Olympic Games are more than contests. They're magnets pulling every city-state into a single place. And oh, the noise! Merchants bark prices for honey cakes. A bard plucks his lyre, singing about Heracles wrestling lions. Children dart through the legs of oxen, laughing as their mothers shout warnings. It's like a music festival mixed with a farmer's market and just a hint of "watch your coin purse." You notice tents springing up like mushrooms after rain, scattered across the fields. Families cook lentils over small fires, Athletes stretch and show off, and groups of old men debate politics, each convinced their polis is the wisest of all. The atmosphere is equal parts holiday and competition, and you can almost feel the tension humming under the laughter. Rivalries didn't vanish just because everyone's walking in the same direction. One mainstream fact: the Olympic Games drew people from across the Mediterranean, not just mainland Greece. Colonies from Asia Minor and southern Italy sent athletes too, making Olympia one of the few times these scattered Greek communities actually felt like one civilization. Here's the quirky tidbit. People brought souvenirs. Archaeologists have found little clay figurines, trinkets, and charms sold at Olympia, proof that even 2,700 years ago, humans couldn't resist buying overpriced knickknacks at big events. Somewhere in that crowd, someone is haggling over a tiny bronze Zeus to take home, muttering that the price is outrageous. You walk beside a farmer from Thessaly, leading a mule loaded with cheese wheels. He brags that his nephew is running in the stadion race. Ahead of you, a pair of Corinthians argue about whether chariot racing counts as real athletics or just sitting down while the horses do the work. Historians still argue whether athletes or horses got more credit when a team won. Imagine training your whole life, sweating in the sun, only to lose to a horse. Brutal. The sun climbs higher and the road grows hotter. You wipe sweat from your forehead, feeling your tunic stick to your back. The crowd thins as the sanctuary gates come into view. Soldiers stand there, not to fight, but to ensure order. The truce of Ekakeria, sacred peace, protects everyone traveling here. Still, you notice how hands linger near daggers just in case. Old grudges don't melt away as quickly as wax. Inside the gates, the sanctuary swells with bodies. The clamor is overwhelming. Chants to Zeus, bartering calls, the metallic clang of a blacksmith hammering last-minute repairs on a chariot wheel. The smell is even stronger, roasting meat, sweat, olive oil, horse dung. It's raw and alive, and you realize this isn't just sport. It's society compressed into one valley for a few blazing days. As you make your way through the press of bodies, you catch glimpses of athletes jogging in place, priests preparing more offerings, and sculptors setting up marble blocks for temporary displays. Everything here screams urgency, like the world condensed and sped up. Every face seems sharper, every voice louder. And in the middle of it all, you. Just one traveler among thousands, swept up in a tide that has been waiting generations to crest. The festival hasn't even begun, and already you're dizzy from the energy, like trying to nap at a rock concert. You pause, leaning against a warm stone wall, and take a slow breath. Above, the temple looms, its columns stretching skyward as if they're scaffolding for the heavens. The games may belong to athletes, but this journey belongs to everyone. The farmers, the merchants, the storytellers, and yes, even you, weary traveler, with dust on your sandals and awe in your chest. The roads have emptied into Olympia now, and the sanctuary hums like a hive on the edge of bursting. You notice how the crowds move a little easier, shoulders looser, voices lighter. There's a reason the sacred truce, Ekakeria, is in effect. For weeks leading up to the games, heralds called spondophoroi had roamed across Greece, announcing that all wars must halt. And that's wild when you think about it. Greece is a patchwork quilt of city-states, each one itching for a fight. Sparta versus Argos, Athens against pretty much everyone. War is as common as wine. Yet here, for this brief window, swords stay sheathed. You don't have to glance nervously over your shoulder or worry that the stranger beside you might be an enemy. Instead, you walk side by side into Olympia, rivalries put on pause. The truce isn't just a polite suggestion. Break it, and you're cursed by Zeus himself. Imagine explaining to your troops that they can't raid a rival's fields because the thunder god might smite us. Even the most stubborn generals usually decided it wasn't worth the risk. Still, historians argue whether everyone respected the truce fully. There are accounts of city-states sneaking in a few skirmishes, pretending not to notice the no-fighting signs like teenagers ignoring curfew. Did they really stop fighting completely? Or was it more like a try not to get caught situation? The debate lingers like the smoke over Olympia's altars. As you wander through the crowd, you see Spartans chatting amiably with Athenians, even if their smiles look a little too tight. A Theban merchant hands figs to a Megarian farmer, both laughing loudly, though you suspect a few insults are tucked inside the jokes. The truce makes enemies into neighbors, temporarily. Here's the quirky bit. The truce didn't just protect athletes, it also ensured safe passage for spectators, artists, merchants, and even animals. That's right, your donkey-hauling jars of olive oil to sell in Olympia got divine immunity too. Picture it, a mule strutting proudly because Zeus himself forbids anyone from harming it. The air feels different under the truce, almost lighter. Guards still stand at the gates, but their presence is more ceremonial than threatening. Kids dart between hoplites, tugging on their bronze greaves, laughing when the soldiers pretend to chase them off. Everywhere you look, relief flickers in people's eyes, as if for a few short weeks, the world's sharp edges have softened. Of course, you can't help but notice the undercurrent. Spartans still walk in rigid phalanx formation, just to remind everyone they could crush skulls, if not for Zeus's time out. Athenians still boast about philosophy and democracy loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Old grudges don't vanish. They simmer, tucked away like coals under ash. Yet, when the sun dips lower and torches flicker on, you feel the miracle of it. Thousands of Greeks, who on any other day might be trying to burn each other's crops, are now sitting shoulder to shoulder, sharing food, trading gossip, waiting for the games. One fact remains clear. Without Ekakeria, the games could never have happened. War was constant. Roads were dangerous. But here, under Zeus's gaze, peace holds long enough for competition to thrive. You sit on the grass, chewing a hunk of bread, listening to laughter ripple through the sanctuary. The truce has turned Olympia into the safest place in Greece, if only for a heartbeat in history. And as the stars appear, you wonder, how strange that mortals can lay down their weapons, not for treaties or kings, but for a race across a dusty field. Maybe the gods knew what humans needed better than humans knew themselves. Morning arrives in Olympia with a golden haze. the kind that makes you squint even before you open your eyes fully. The first thing you notice is movement, the constant shuffle of feet, the clatter of pots, the bray of donkeys, and voices calling out in every dialect of Greece. Olympia has transformed overnight into a temporary city. Tents, lean-tos, and makeshift stalls stretch across every open patch of ground. You wander through the bustling encampment, brushing past families who've traveled days just to watch men run in the dust. Merchants shout about olives, figs, and honey cakes, their voices competing with flute players performing for tips. Somewhere nearby, a man is balancing on his hands while a small crowd cheers. Because why not show off when you've got the biggest audience in the Mediterranean? This is more than a sporting event. It's a cultural explosion. Sculptors bring fresh marble busts, hoping to sell them to wealthy patrons. Poets declaim verses, some noble, some absolutely terrible, but all delivered with grand hand gestures. Philosophers argue under olive trees, gesturing with figs in hand, as if Socrates himself might be persuaded by fruit. You half expect someone to start selling t-shirts that read, "I survived Olympia 776 BCE. And the food, oh, the food. Roasting meat fills the air with thick, smoky sweetness. Bakers hawk loaves still warm from clay ovens. If you have a few coins, you can feast like a king. If not, there's always barley bread handed out by pious donors looking to score divine brownie points. Somewhere in the chaos, someone offers you a sip of wine, diluted, of course, because only barbarians drink it straight. Here's the mainstream fact. Olympia wasn't just an athletic hub. It was also a marketplace for ideas. Think of it as the ancient world's version of a trade fair plus Comic-Con plus a TED Talk festival, all wrapped up in one sunburned, sweaty package. Now, the quirky bit. Archaeologists have found evidence of makeshift souvenir shops. That's right, long before plastic keychains, people were already selling trinkets with Olympian flair. Tiny terracotta figurines, bronze tokens, even little vases marked with images of athletes. Proof that humans have always loved taking home a piece of the show. Still, historians argue whether the games were truly inclusive for all Greeks, or mostly a playground for the wealthy elite. After all, travel wasn't cheap, and not every farmer could leave behind goats and crops for weeks. Some scholars suggest Olympia attracted mostly nobles and upper-class merchants, while others insist the crowds were wildly diverse. You glance around the throng, barefoot shepherds rubbing shoulders with silk-robed aristocrats, and you wonder which version is closer to the truth. The sheer noise of Olympia could keep you awake all night. Torches crackle, lyres strum, and somewhere a bard is butchering Homer's epics while a drunk heckles from the sidelines. Yet despite the chaos, there's a hum of anticipation that keeps everyone glued to the festival. You feel it in your bones. Tomorrow, the competitions begin. You settle on a patch of grass, your head resting on your folded cloak as the firelight dances on nearby tents. A group of children chase each other, pretending to be athletes already crowned with olive wreaths. Merchants count their coins. Priests rehearse their chants. Even the animals seem caught up in the tension. A goat bleats so loudly you swear it's calling for Zeus's blessing. And as you drift closer to sleep, you realize that Olympia is more than a place. It's an experience, a sensory overload stitched together by faith, commerce, and human curiosity. For now, you're part of the world's first Olympic village, where the smell of roasted lamb, the babble of philosophers, and the jingle of coins all melt into one timeless soundscape. Tomorrow, the dust will rise, but tonight, Olympia is alive. The morning sun hits you before the rooster even thinks about crowing. Olympia is already stirring, and you're swept into the tide of people heading toward the grand temple of Zeus. The smell of incense hangs heavy in the air, mixing with the damp morning mist. Priests in long white robes glide past, their faces solemn, their movements deliberate. Today is not just about sport, it's about the gods. Without them, there would be no games. You find yourself in front of the altar, where a massive bull stands tethered, its hide shimmering with oil and its horns wrapped in gold leaf. The crowd hushes as the high priest steps forward, his voice rolling across the assembly. A prayer is offered, long and winding, thanking Zeus for strength, asking him to bless the athletes, and reminding everyone that the games themselves are acts of devotion. Then comes the sacrifice. The bull is felled, and the air fills with the scent of burning meat as chunks are laid on the sacred fire. The smoke curls skyward, supposedly carrying human gratitude straight into the nostrils of Zeus himself. The priests share the remaining meat with the crowd, reminding you that this is also a feast as much as a ritual. You get a taste. It's smoky, rich, and slightly tough, but somehow feels like holy food. Here's the grounded fact. Every Olympic Games began with a sacrifice to Zeus, the king of the gods. This wasn't optional. It was the foundation. The temple itself housed one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, a colossal gold and ivory statue of Zeus, so imposing that Roman travelers centuries later swore it made them feel tiny just standing in its shadow. Now for the quirky tidbit. Not only bulls were sacrificed. Records suggest goats and sheep sometimes got the honor, and in one slightly bizarre story, a chicken was offered up when no larger animal could be found. Imagine the awkward hush as a lone rooster became the stand-in for divine appeasement. And of course, historians still argue whether these sacrifices were primarily acts of faith or convenient excuses for a giant barbecue. Some point to the sheer volume of animals consumed and whisper about political motives, keep the masses fed, and they'll stay happy under Zeus's watchful gaze. Others insist the rituals were deeply spiritual, with athletes believing their very performance depended on Zeus's blessing. The spectacle isn't just religious, it's a social glue. You notice rivals from different cities bowing their heads side by side, sworn enemies sharing slices of roasted bull. For this moment, the altar unites them. Tomorrow they might hurl insults or javelins, but today they stand shoulder to shoulder as worshipers. The atmosphere is thick with awe. A flute player begins a slow, haunting tune. Priests sprinkle barley grains onto the flames, which crackle as sparks leap skyward. You close your eyes and feel the weight of thousands of years pressing in, humans searching for approval from forces they cannot see. A boy tugs your sleeve and whispers, "Do you think Zeus is watching?" You glance up at the drifting smoke, and though you don't say it aloud, you're wondering the same thing. Because whether or not the God himself cares about the outcome of a long jump, everyone here believes it matters. And that belief shapes the games as surely as the stadium walls. Tomorrow, the athletes will strip down, oil up, and clash in the dust. But tonight, you can still taste the divine feast on your lips, a reminder that before every race and every cheer, there must first be fire, sacrifice, and a prayer to the sky. The smoke from yesterday's sacrifice still lingers in your clothes as dawn breaks over Olympia again. But today, the air feels sharper, electric, because this is the first true day of competition. You follow the surge of bodies toward the stadion track, a wide strip of packed earth that will decide who is fastest under the eyes of gods and men. The athletes gather at one end, bare skin gleaming with oil, muscles taut as bowstrings. Each runner digs his toes into a shallow starting groove cut into stone, a kind of ancient starting block. The crowd quiets, then erupts in a rolling roar, eager for the first event. The stadion race, a straight sprint of about 200 meters. Here's the firm fact. This sprint was the centerpiece of the earliest Olympics. Winning it wasn't just about speed, it gave you immortal fame. Entire Olympiads were sometimes named after the victor of this one race. Imagine history books calling an entire year the year of Bob, the fast guy. The signal comes. A priest's hand drops, and they explode forward. Sand kicks up, muscles ripple, and the crowd surges like a living wave. You squint to keep track, but it's over in a heartbeat. One man stretches ahead, chest bursting through the invisible finish line. Cheers thunder as he throws his arms skyward, basking in glory. Now for the quirky tidbit. Not all runners played fair. Some were caught trying to bribe competitors, and others smeared themselves with sticky resin to make it harder for opponents to grab them in later wrestling matches. One legend even suggests a runner trained by holding his breath for absurdly long stretches, his secret weapon being sheer oxygen deprivation. Not exactly a method you'll find in today's Olympic training guides. And here's the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the stadion track was exactly 600 feet, as claimed, or if that foot varied wildly depending on which Greek city you asked. Your local ruler's toe length could literally change the measurement of your race. So when you hear 200 meters, keep in mind it was more like 200-ish. After the sprint, more races unfold. The dialos, a double lap that tests endurance, and the dolichos, a grueling long-distance event that leaves runners staggering like drunks at closing time. The crowd adores it all, though secretly most are just waiting for the wrestling and pancration to come. The events where sweat and dust turn into something primal. You glance around and notice something. There are no medals, no ribbons, no shiny trophies. The only prize waiting at the end is a simple wreath of olive leaves. But that wreath, cut from the sacred tree of Zeus, carries more weight than gold. Winning it means poets will sing your name, cities will carve statues in your likeness, and back home, you might literally get free meals for life. And in that moment, watching the victor raise his wreath to the sky, you realize this is less about personal triumph and more about stepping into the current of immortality. Every runner, every gasp of the crowd, every grain of dust kicked into the air. It all feels like the start of a story people will still be telling thousands of years later. The games have begun in earnest, and now you're hooked. Tomorrow promises sweat, grappling, and maybe a few bloody noses. For tonight, though, the echo of pounding feet still rings in your ears as if Zeus himself just clapped his hands across the stadium. The second dawn of competition slides over Olympia, and you're already learning the rhythm of this ancient festival. The sacrifices, the cheering, the dust. The whole place thrums like a giant heartbeat. Today, though, you head to a different kind of spectacle, the wrestling ground. The stadion was about speed. Here, it's all about strength, technique, and sheer stubbornness. You push through the throng and find yourself near the scamma, the dug-up place where wrestlers compete. The soil has been churned soft, almost like a giant sandbox, because athletes will be hitting the ground a lot. Competitors step forward, oiled and dusted with fine powder to keep them from slipping like buttered squid. The crowd leans in. This isn't just sport, it's a live chess match with sweat and grunts. Here's the solid fact. Wrestling was one of the most ancient and honored events of the games. A wrestler had to throw his opponent 3 times to claim victory. No time limits, no points for style, just grit. Imagine tug of war, except your body is the rope. And the quirky tidbit. Wrestlers sometimes smeared themselves with olive oil, then sprinkled sand over it, a sort of DIY exfoliation. It gave them grip, but also made them sparkle like sugared pastries under the sun. There's even gossip of athletes using secret potions, honey mixed with strange herbs, before matches. Ancient pre-workout with the side effect of possibly making you burp mid-grapple. As the contest begins, you hear the sharp clap of bodies colliding, see shoulders twist, and legs sweep. One wrestler hooks his arm under another's elbow, trying to topple him. The other digs in, knees bent, refusing to budge. Then, with a sudden heave, one body slams to the ground, and dust billows into the crowd like smoke. The audience roars, a mixture of awe and bloodthirsty glee. Here's the debate. Historians still argue about whether holds that risked breaking bones were truly allowed. The sources are muddy. Some say the Greeks wanted raw dominance. Others argue they cared about restraint. Judging by the occasional scream of pain from the pit, it's safe to say things sometimes accidentally went too far. The matches roll on, each one more intense than the last. The wrestlers' faces twist with effort, veins bulging as they strain. You can almost feel the ground quake beneath each fall. No weight classes, no safety mats, just raw human competition under the blazing Greek sun. And in the midst of it, you notice something small but striking. The victor doesn't strut or taunt. He simply raises his hand, almost humble, as the priest notes his win. Honor mattered as much as triumph here. Winning by trickery or cowardice would follow you back home worse than a loss. When the final match ends and the exhausted champion wipes grit from his eyes, the crowd spills out into the sanctuary grounds. Everyone buzzes with excitement, already debating who will shine tomorrow. But the games don't pause. Somewhere nearby, the sounds of the discus and javelin throw drift over. The pentathlon, with its dizzying mix of events, is about to claim the spotlight. For now, though, you carry with you the memory of that raw, grinding spectacle. Men locked in dusty embraces, straining against the limits of the human body. And whether or not bones were meant to be broken, you know the spirit of the games was always about testing exactly where those limits lie. You drift with the crowd toward the field again, where the pentathlon is about to unfold. 5 contests, one after the other, all woven together like threads in a single tapestry. The Greeks loved balance, and this event was their idea of the perfect athlete, not just strong, not just fast, but skilled across the board. If the stadion sprint was lightning and wrestling was thunder, the pentathlon was the rainbow in between. First comes the discus. Athletes step into the throwing circle with bronze discs, each one heavy enough to make your wrist ache just by imagining it. They whirl in smooth arcs, the sun glinting off the metal as it sails. You squint, trying to follow its path until it lands with a thud, scattering dust. It's elegant and violent at the same time, like frisbee, but with the constant risk of dislocating your shoulder. Then the javelin. Slender spears are gripped by leather thongs for extra spin. When an athlete launches one, it whistles through the air, slicing the silence before stabbing into the ground. Somewhere in the crowd, a man jokes that it's lucky no spectators stand too close. You shiver at the thought. Stadium safety standards weren't exactly a thing yet. Now the long jump. No springboards, no sand pits. Instead, jumpers clutch small stone weights called halteres. They swing them forward and leap as if being yanked through the air by invisible hands. Some land gracefully, others less so, feet skidding, knees buckling, the occasional tumble into dust. Still, the idea that holding extra weight somehow makes you jump farther? Historians still argue whether it actually worked or if it was all psychological. And then, of course, another sprint, short, brutal, with every step pounding into the track. The athletes' lungs heave, their faces twist. Some falter halfway. Others burst forward as if their lives depend on it. Finally, wrestling, the same as you saw yesterday, but now it's part of the pentathlon's grand finale. The victor must not only grapple, but also prove he has survived every previous challenge. By this point, the athletes are drenched in sweat, legs trembling, arms shaking. Yet they throw themselves into combat with stubborn fire. The quirky tidbit? Some sources say the pentathlon champion was considered almost superhuman, attractive to gods and mortals alike. Poets even swooned about their bodies in verses that sound suspiciously like fan fiction. Imagine a whole crowd thirst posting about your abs, but in ancient hexameter. The scholarly debate? Historians still puzzle over exactly how the scoring worked. Was it about winning the most events? Or was victory in wrestling the final decisive factor no matter what? The rules are cloudy, like trying to read a contract where half the clauses are written in disappearing ink. You stand there, swept up in the spectacle, realizing how these 5 contests mirror life itself. Speed, strength, precision, endurance, and resilience, each one necessary, but none enough alone. The Greeks didn't just want champions. They wanted balance, harmony, the golden mean brought to life in sweat and muscle. As the sun dips lower and shadows stretch across Olympia, the pentathlon ends with a roar of applause. The victors are lifted high, paraded through the crowd. Somewhere nearby, vendors hawk olives and bread, the smell of roasting meat mingling with dust and sweat. Tomorrow will bring even stranger sights, the pancration, a brutal fusion of wrestling and boxing that makes today's contest look like friendly hugs. But tonight, under the orange glow of sunset, you walk away carrying the echo of those five-fold battles. Not just sport, but philosophy in motion, the Greeks' answer to the eternal question, what does it mean to be complete? The next morning, you shuffle back into the stadium, and there's already a different tension in the air. Yesterday was about balance and elegance. Today, it's about survival. The pancration is about to begin. The name alone, All Powers, gives you a clue. It's a no-holds-barred mashup of boxing and wrestling, the closest thing the Greeks had to a cage fight. Except there are no cages, no gloves, and brace yourself, almost no rules. You squeeze between sweaty spectators, feeling the anticipation ripple like static electricity. Two fighters step into the arena, stripped down, coated in oil and dust. One bows his head briefly, the other cracks his knuckles. The referee raises a rod in warning. No biting, no eye gouging. Everything else, fair game. That's it. You think of modern referees in striped shirts with whistles and realize, yeah, they wouldn't last 5 minutes here. The match begins. Fists hammer into flesh with dull thuds. One fighter dives low, snaring a leg, dragging his opponent to the ground. Suddenly, it's a tangle of limbs, bodies twisting, choking, squeezing. You wince as a forearm digs into a throat, as knuckles pound ribs like drums. Every few seconds, the crowd gasps, some with horror, others with glee, as if this is the best entertainment since sliced bread. Except sliced bread won't exist for another 2,000 years. One quirky tidbit. The Greeks admired pancration so much that legends say even Heracles, the mighty hero, used it against monsters. Another story gives credit to Theseus when he wrestled the Minotaur. So yes, the sport was literally mythologized. Imagine people in the future saying Spider-Man invented MMA. It's that level of cultural fusion. The debate? Historians still argue how much injury was tolerated before a referee stepped in. Some records describe broken bones and collapsed lungs. Others insist there was some mercy when a fighter raised a finger in submission. Did refs actually enforce safety, or was it fight until somebody can't stand? The line between competition and chaos remains blurry. You watch as one match drags on, the fighters reduced to gasping beasts. Sweat pours, sand sticks to their skin, muscles tremble. Suddenly, one man raises his hand, index finger extended. The referee slaps the other fighter's back, signaling the end. The victor stands, wobbling on shaky legs, face battered but radiant with triumph. The crowd roars. Somewhere behind you, a boy whispers, "He looks like a god." You realize the pancration isn't just about violence. It's a test of willpower, the refusal to quit even when everything hurts. The Greeks believed this toughness mirrored the human struggle itself, the fight against chaos, fate, even death. That's why the winners were admired not only for strength, but for sheer grit. And while you're still processing all this brutality, the announcer calls for the next fighters. The day stretches on with match after match, each one blurring into a haze of sweat, dust, and raw survival. As the sun slides toward the horizon, the crowd disperses slowly, voices buzzing with excitement. Some shake their heads in disbelief. Others can't stop retelling the most brutal takedowns. You rub your eyes, exhausted just from watching. Tomorrow promises the last great event, the 4-horse chariot race, a spectacle of speed and danger that will make even the Pancratian look like child's play. For now, though, you trudge away with the echo of fists in your ears, realizing you've just witnessed the raw edge of ancient sport, the closest glimpse you'll ever get of men pushing themselves to the very limits of pain, pride, and endurance. You wake to the rumble of hooves before the sun is even fully awake. Dust hangs in the air like mist, stirred by the restless stamping of horses. Today is the grand finale, the event that makes hearts race even before it begins. The chariot races. You shuffle toward the hippodrome, the massive racetrack carved into the earth, and you can already hear the chatter of thousands gathering to witness the most dangerous sport of them all. The arena feels colossal, almost overwhelming. Rows upon rows of spectators pack themselves onto stone benches, their shouts rolling like thunder. You squint against the morning glare and see the chariots being wheeled out, lightweight wooden frames, almost fragile, each pulled by 4 snorting stallions. The drivers, lean and wiry, wear nothing but short tunics and leather straps. No helmets, no padding, just bare nerves and sheer skill. You mutter to yourself, seat belts would be nice, but no one here would know what you mean. The starting gate creaks open. The horses strain against their reins, eyes wild, muscles coiled like springs. Then, blast of a trumpet and they're off. Instantly, the ground trembles under pounding hooves. Sand sprays into the air, stinging your cheeks. The chariots surge forward, wheels rattling dangerously as drivers yank their reins, urging their teams into tight formation. The crowd explodes into screams, names shouted, bets exchanged, prayers muttered under breath. You lean forward as they thunder around the first curve. This is the deadliest part. Sharp turns at full speed. Drivers must steer wide enough to avoid a crash, but close enough to steal a precious second. Too wide, and you lose. Too tight, and you're crushed. And right now, you watch in horror as one chariot tips slightly. The driver yanks back, barely saving himself from disaster. The crowd gasps, then cheers louder, as if flirting with death makes it more thrilling. Here's the fact. Winning this race wasn't just about glory. The victor didn't always get crowned personally. Sometimes it was the wealthy sponsor, the one who owned the horses, who claimed the olive wreath. The poor driver, he risked his life and often didn't even get the recognition. Kind of like when you do all the group project work and someone else gets the grade. And the quirky tidbit? Some charioteers tied the reins around their waist for better control. Smart, right? Until the moment they crashed. Then, instead of flying free, they were dragged mercilessly around the track until, well, let's just say the ending was not fit for bedtime stories. The Greeks even had a word for it, shipwreck. As if comparing being mangled by horses to sinking at sea somehow made it poetic. But historians still argue whether these races were meant to showcase individual skill or raw spectacle. Was it a sport of mastery or just a dangerous entertainment for the crowd's amusement? The evidence points both ways. Some records honor the driver's precision. Others describe them as disposable pawns in a game of wealth and prestige. Lap after lap, the race continues. You lose track of time, hypnotized by the pounding rhythm of hooves, the whirl of wheels, the roar of the people. One chariot pulls ahead, cutting dangerously close at each curve, sparks flying from wheels as they scrape. The crowd surges to its feet, roaring in unison, a tidal wave of sound. Finally, with one last desperate push, the lead driver crosses the finish line, his horses lathered with sweat, his body trembling but upright. The crowd erupts, showering him with olive leaves. Somewhere in the chaos, a patron beams proudly, knowing his name will echo through history, while the driver, well, he gets to keep breathing, at least for now. As the dust settles, you realize you've just seen the climax of the ancient games, a blur of speed, danger, and breathtaking courage. But as the crowd pours out of the hippodrome, another thought lingers. These weren't just contests. They were offerings to Zeus himself. And tomorrow the athletes will gather for the final sacred rituals, binding their sweat, blood, and victories to the gods. The dust of the racetrack still clings to your skin, but the day isn't over. You follow the river of people streaming away from the hippodrome, their voices buzzing with excitement, their wagers settled, their favorite drivers praised or cursed. Yet even after all that chaos, the games are far from finished. There is something deeper, quieter, waiting just beyond the noise. The sacred rituals that tie every broken bone, every victory lap, every bead of sweat back to the gods. You wander toward the sanctuary of Zeus, the heart of Olympia. The temple looms above the valley, columns gleaming in the fading sunlight. Inside rests the colossal gold and ivory statue of Zeus himself, towering higher than you thought possible, his stern eyes watching over everything. You pause for a moment, wondering if he really cares who ran fastest or wrestled hardest. But here, every athlete, every spectator believes he does. Torches flicker to life as the sun dips low. The smell of smoke and roasted meat wafts through the air. You approach the altar, a massive stone mound blackened by centuries of offerings. This is where it all converges, where human sweat meets divine fire. Athletes line up, their bodies sore and bruised, yet their faces carry a strange glow. They bring animals for sacrifice, oxen, sheep, goats, each meant as a gift of gratitude. A priest steps forward, robes flowing, voice steady as he chants words you don't understand. The crowd hushes. Then, with practiced precision, the sacrifice begins. Flames leap high, sparks drifting into the night sky. The scent of burning fat mixes with incense, heavy and sweet. You catch yourself thinking it smells a lot like a backyard barbecue gone sacred. Except here, the smoke is believed to carry prayers straight up to Olympus itself. Here's the historical fact. Sacrifices weren't an afterthought. They were central to the games. Victories were considered gifts from the gods, and the winners were expected to give thanks by offering part of their prize animals, or in some cases, dedicating statues of themselves to Zeus. a way of saying, "Thanks for the help. I couldn't have done it without you." And the quirky tidbit? Sometimes winners would hire sculptors to carve statues of their bodies in the exact moment of triumph. Muscles exaggerated, poses heroic. Imagine leaving a giant stone version of yourself flexing for eternity. Talk about ego goals. But historians still argue whether these rituals were truly acts of devotion or more like ancient PR stunts. Were athletes genuinely pious, or were they just buying divine approval the same way modern celebrities sponsor charities? Maybe a little of both. The fire crackles louder, sparks swirling like fireflies. You watch as priests sprinkle wine and grains into the flames, the crowd murmuring softly, hands lifted in reverence. Then, in a moment of silence, the victors themselves step forward. One by one, they lay olive wreaths, small tokens, into the fire. You see their eyes shining, not with pride, but with awe. For them, it isn't just about winning. It's about being seen by Zeus, remembered by the gods. As the night deepens, the rituals shift from solemn to celebratory. The meat from the sacrifices is shared, roasted, and handed out to the crowd. The smell alone is enough to make your stomach growl. You take a bite, juicy, smoky, tender, and realize that for the people of Olympia, this isn't just worship. It's community, a giant feast, a shared moment of belonging under the gaze of the divine. The flames burn low, casting long shadows across the temple walls. Above you, the stars shimmer brighter than you've ever seen, scattered across the velvet sky. And for a moment, you feel it, that electric thread connecting mortals and gods, games and rituals, life and afterlife. Tomorrow, the athletes will return to their homes, carrying tales of victory and glory. But tonight, they stand shoulder to shoulder, humbled, grateful, offering pieces of themselves to something greater. And as you sit among them, full of roasted meat and flickering firelight, you can't help but wonder, was it the competition that made the games immortal, or this shared act of reverence that bound them all together? The fire's warmth still lingers on your skin, but morning comes quickly, and with it, the final tests. You wake to a chorus of footsteps and murmurs as the city stirs, everyone knowing this is the day of the hardest trials. No more chariot wheels, no more grand parades. Today it's about raw endurance, sweat soaking through dust, lungs burning like bellows, the foot races and the pentathlon, the events that leave even the strongest gasping. You shuffle toward the stadium, its long, narrow track stretching into the distance like a ribbon of packed earth. No marble seating here, no fancy architecture, just a grassy embankment where thousands of spectators squat shoulder to shoulder. The simplicity almost makes it harsher, as if the games are stripping away everything until only the athlete remains. The herald raises his voice and the stadion race begins. Barefoot runners crouch at the starting line, their bodies tense, eyes locked on the path. At the signal, they explode forward, feet pounding the dirt, arms slicing air. The crowd roars, not with polite claps, but guttural shouts, urging their favorites to push harder. You can feel your own heart sinking with theirs, faster, faster, until one man bursts ahead, chest heaving, face twisted in determination. The finish is just a stone marker, but when he crosses it first, the entire stadium erupts as if Zeus himself had appeared. Here's the fact. The stadion was the original Olympic race, a sprint about 200 meters long. Simple, brutal, decisive. And quirky detail, runners competed naked, not for freedom of movement as much as to honor the human body itself. Imagine ESPN covering that today. Historians still argue whether athletes trained year-round under professional coaches or mostly prepared in bursts leading up to the games. Some evidence points to specialized gymnasiums. Others suggest much of their conditioning came from farming and military drills. Either way, those calves could probably outrun your morning jog with embarrassing ease. Next comes the pentathlon, a 5-part ordeal that seems designed to break both body and spirit. Long jump, discus throw, javelin, running, and finally, wrestling. It isn't about being best at one, it's about being good at all. The first man soars through the air, weighted jumpstones clutched in his hands, landing in the sand with a grunt. Another spins with a discus, the heavy stone disc slicing the air before thudding far downfield. The crowd gasps, half in awe, half in envy of his raw strength. Then javelins whistle, piercing the sky like spears in battle, reminding everyone these men aren't just athletes, they're future soldiers. The run follows, legs already trembling but forced into another race. And at last, wrestling. 2 exhausted men grappling, sand clinging to sweat, each trying to pin the other. Victory here isn't graceful, it's gritty, desperate, and absolutely riveting. The quirky tidbit. Athletes sometimes smeared themselves with olive oil before competing, partly for ritual purity and partly because, well, it looked good under the sun. Afterward, they scraped the oil, sweat, and dust off with a tool called a strigil, and some fans collected the gunk in little jars, believing it held magical healing powers. Yes, ancient fan merch was basically athlete sweat jars. As the pentathlon ends, victors collapse into the sand, groaning, smiling, crying all at once. You look at them and realize they aren't superhuman. They're just men, battered and mortal, yet carrying the weight of immortality on their shoulders. The sun sinks low again, bathing the stadium in gold. One by one, exhausted competitors bow their heads, knowing they gave everything. And somewhere in the crowd, priests begin to stir, preparing for the next day's crowning moment. You sit back on the grass, legs aching in sympathy, and whisper to yourself, if survival here depends on strength, speed, and endurance, you probably wouldn't make it past the first lap. But at least you'd look shiny in olive oil. The dust of the track hasn't yet settled, but a shift hangs in the air. The races, the wrestling, the thunder of feet, and the roar of the crowd, they've all been building toward this. Now everything grows hushed, heavy with expectation. The games are nearly over, but the ending is not simply about winners. It's about something sacred. You follow the crowd uphill toward the great altar of Zeus. The god of thunder looms invisible, but his presence feels carved into every stone and every heartbeat. Smoke curls into the sky as priests lead a procession of animals for sacrifice. Cattle, sleek and decorated with garlands, are led forward. Drums and pipes echo through the valley, creating a rhythm that feels older than language itself. Here's your fact for tonight. On the third day of the Olympics, the grand hecatomb took place, literally the sacrifice of 100 oxen to Zeus. Their meat was later shared as a feast for the people, the smell of roasting flesh filling the air. Imagine a barbecue the size of a small country fair, only with more thunderbolts looming overhead. And the quirky tidbit: the ashes of these sacrifices were collected year after year, mixed with water, and shaped into a massive mound at Zeus's altar. Over time, it grew into a sacred hill of ash, basically the god's compost pile. People even believed stepping near it brought you closer to divinity. Historians still argue whether all the animals were truly slaughtered on the spot, or if the number 100 was symbolic, a way to emphasize abundance and devotion. Either way, the ritual wasn't just for Zeus, it was a message to everyone watching. The games belonged not to men, but to the gods. The athletes, sweat still drying on their skin, stand apart. Their fates are about to be sealed. The priests chant, the fires roar, and the sacrifices are completed with solemn precision. Somewhere in the haze of smoke and song, you can almost believe Zeus himself leans down, judging who among these mortals has earned glory. Then comes the moment the crowd has been waiting for, the announcement of victors. Heralds step forward, their voices carrying across the assembly. Names are called, cheers erupt, and men who only days ago were ordinary citizens are now heroes, immortalized in story. The prize: no gold, no silver, no bronze, just a simple wreath of wild olive leaves cut from the sacred tree of Zeus. You might think that sounds anticlimactic, but here's the beauty. To win meant eternal fame, sculpted in statues, sung by poets, remembered by generations. The wreath was just a symbol, delicate and perishable, yet carrying more weight than any pile of treasure. Kind of like giving someone a plastic trophy today. But that trophy means you'll be written into history books forever. The winners step forward, heads bowed, tears streaking down dusty faces. Priests lift the wreaths, pressing them gently onto their hair. The crowd roars, some people even weeping with joy. You can feel the emotions swell: pride for the city, awe for the athlete, reverence for the god. As the sun dips low, the victors are paraded through Olympia, followed by musicians, dancers, and chanting children. Torches flicker, shadows stretch long, and for a brief moment, you feel like you're walking not through a festival, but through eternity itself. And yet, you also notice the quiet faces of those who lost. They smile politely, they clap, but their eyes betray exhaustion and perhaps the sting of dreams unfulfilled. Still, even in loss, there is honor, for simply competing meant your name would echo back home, proof you stood in the dust of Zeus's own field. The night ends in celebration. Wine flows, meat is shared, songs are sung under the stars. You sit back, a little dazed, belly full from the communal feast, and realize the games aren't about winning or losing. They're about weaving men, cities, and gods into one tapestry. The ash mound grows a little higher. The wreaths gleam faintly in torchlight. And you tuck the memory away, knowing you've just witnessed something humans will chase forever. The dream of immortality through glory. The torches are still glowing faintly as dawn creeps in, a pale ribbon of light sliding across Olympia. You rub your eyes, maybe a little groggy from all that imaginary wine and roasted oxen, and realize the games are ending. The athletes pack up, the priests extinguish sacred fires, and the great river of humanity begins to flow outward. The air feels thinner now, emptier, like the last song fading after a concert you didn't want to end. Crowds shuffle onto dusty roads, banners tucked away, drums silent. Victors walk home proudly, olive wreaths perched delicately like fragile halos. Losers carry bruises, but also stories, proof they were part of something bigger. You follow them step by step, leaving behind temples, stadiums, and the echo of cheers that still hang in the valley. Here's your fact. The Olympics were held every 4 years, without fail, for over 1,000 years, until the Romans finally shut them down. Imagine your school hosting the exact same sports day, not just for a decade, but for an entire millennium. That's devotion. And the quirky tidbit, athletes sometimes built statues of themselves if they cheated. Yes, you heard that right. If you got caught bribing or breaking rules, you had to pay for a bronze statue of Zeus as punishment. They were lined up along the path to the stadium, each inscribed with the cheater's name. Basically, the world's first wall of shame. Historians still argue whether the games were more about religion or politics. Were they genuinely spiritual, or were they just an ancient PR stunt for city-states flexing their power? Maybe both. Humans, after all, love to mix piety with prestige. As you drift along with the dispersing crowd, you notice how the games linger, not just in memory, but in how they reshaped the idea of being human, competing for honor, seeking fairness under the watch of gods, finding unity through rivalry. That seed sprouted here. And yes, it grew into something modern with medals and TV coverage, but its roots remain in the dust of Olympia. You sit down for one last look at the stadium, grass-bent, earth-scarred, but alive with echoes. You almost hear the thunder of hooves, the roar of the crowd, the triumphant cry of an athlete crowned in olive. It all feels so close, as if time folded and handed you a front row seat. So you lean back, let out a sigh, and admit, you survived. You survived ancient Greek food, sunburns, possibly questionable water supplies, and the chaos of 1,000 sweaty strangers cheering at once. Well done. But maybe the games weren't designed to be comfortable. They were designed to test limits. Yours, theirs, humanity's. To remind everyone that in the end, we're all just mortals chasing a taste of immortality. And with that thought, the games dissolve, leaving only the whisper of wind through olive. And now, with Olympia fading behind us, it's time to let go of the noise, the dust, and even the laughter. The torches are out, the crowds are gone, and the valley lies quiet once more. You feel the hush of the ancient world wrap around you, like a blanket that has been waiting all along. The stadium, once alive with thunder and sweat, now rests in silence. The olive wreaths have wilted, the sacrifices turned to ash, the songs faded into memory. Yet in that stillness, you sense something soft and reassuring, that history doesn't really vanish. It just learns how to whisper instead of shout. So breathe slowly, letting your chest rise and fall like the tide of the Alpheus River that once carried pilgrims home. Feel the weight of time loosen, the sharp edges of the day smoothing into calm. Imagine yourself lying on warm earth, stars drifting above, the same constellations the Greeks once followed. They believed the gods were up there, watching. Maybe they still are, but tonight they're quiet too. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let your thoughts wander like athletes leaving the field, one by one, until only silence remains. And as you drift, remember, glory fades, empires crumble, but rest, that sweet, unshakable rest, always returns. Good night, and may your dreams be lighter than an olive leaf. Sweet dreams.